That's where the Marines had their Phantoms. The Phantom was the type of jet, you know, the Marine Corps flew and everything. And when he came back from Vietnam, I hadn't seen him in about 3 years, and I had been elsewhere in the Marine Corps. And I voiced that to him one day. I said, you know, I feel like maybe I should have gone. Like, you know, I feel like maybe it's like a feeling almost of guilt, you know, that, you know, well, everybody else went to Vietnam, but you didn't go. And my brother said something real simple to me. He said, just be thankful you didn't have to go, because it was a nightmare over there. I mean, it really was. Even where he was at Chu Lai, at nighttime they'd go to bed and they'd be awakened in the middle of the night with border rounds walking in, and you hear one boom, and then the next one would be closer, and the next one would be closer, and coming right at you, and you had to run in your underwear, grab your rifle and your helmet, run out in your, what we call our skivvies, and run and jump in the foxhole. And so Vietnam, you know, I've talked to a lot of guys. I had a lot of friends that were there, and it literally was, in a sense, a nightmare. But there's still, I think until the day I die, there's always going to be a part of me that thinks that, you know, that, or at least sort of, in a sense, feels like I should have gone, you know what I mean?
Do you know anyone who was killed in the war? And how did you and the community feel there?
Excuse me. Well, I had a good friend that was wounded. He was only over there 31 days, and he got hit by a grenade. He was a friend of mine in the Marine Corps, but he and I, just by virtue of many different factors, he ended up going to Vietnam, and he lost a lot of his body parts, like part of his pancreas, and he was in the Naval Hospital for a long time. So injury and death were a very real part of it. My brother's drill instructor was actually killed over there. And he was really a great man. He's looked at now by a lot of people as a hero. You know, he saved a lot of lives, and he was a real Marine, you know. But as far as my unit, the guys I was with in the Mediterranean and everything, because that's what happened when I got back from the Mediterranean. My whole battalion went to Vietnam, and, except for a few of us that were selected for other things. And so all these years later, I really don't know who died over there. I've tried on a couple of occasions. You can go to the virtual wall on the Vietnam Wall that's in Washington, but you can do it on the internet and search names and stuff. And I've tried to find, I've looked for different names and stuff, and I fortunately have not found them, which would tell me that they made it, you know. So, but the one guy, the drill instructor, my brother's, but the only one I really had any connection to, you know.
How did the community feel?
Well, you know, there was like any protracted war, you know what I mean, it just went on and on and on, and as it went on, and there's some really good people, if you think about it, in this country, and a lot of sensitive people, loving people, and I think that was one of the big issues, is once they saw that our young men and women were dying over there, it changed the whole perspective on the war, you know, and that's why I think at some point I think it had to stop, you know, that we had to get out of there, because America was just tired. Our young people were dying by the thousands, you know. So it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking anytime that, even though, you know, even though Vietnam was viewed differently, you know, I mean, in World War II or the Korean War or any of the subsequent wars. For instance, the Vietnam Marines and soldiers, when they came back, they were booed and that kind of thing. They weren't welcome. They weren't welcomed back as heroes, even though they were just young soldiers that were ordered over there, you know. But you know, can't get away from the fact that there were a lot of young, wonderful young men and women that didn't make it back.
Do you think we lost or won the war?
Oh my goodness. It's funny. I mean, I've never been asked. This is neat. You know, if you could ask me such poignant questions, you know.
If there's anything you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
Oh, I understand that. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to ponder that, because that's a tremendous question. I personally would lean toward, unfortunately, toward losing the war, because we left, in a sense, in a panic. There, to this day, there are some really wonderful men and women who served over there and were officers or even sergeants and everything that were right in the middle of the mess, who believe with all their heart that we could have won that war. Unfortunately, it appears that there were a lot of political things going on, political pressures and stuff to bring our troops back, because people were tired of the war. They were tired of every night seeing on the news, well, so many hundreds or thousands more died today. And that's an awful thing to see every night, you know. But after all, Vietnam went all communist as soon as we left, didn't it? So in that sense, I mean, there is a sense where I feel like we won morally, but in other words, I think our soldiers could come home with their heads held high. They tried their best, you know, under the guidelines of the government and everything. But you know, politically and geopolitically, you have to say, well, we really didn't win that war, because, you know, communism swallowed up South Vietnam as soon as we left. You know.
When were you discharged?
Well, from active duty, I was actually discharged in 1969. Of course, I went back in the Marine Corps later after I grew up a little bit, you know. I started seeing things a little differently. But in 1969, I wanted out. You know what I mean? It just wasn't. You know, people weren't happy. The whole American outlook on the U.S. military was pretty negative at that time, and I just you know, wanted to give civilian life a try, you know, and just put it all behind me.
How did your family and friends react, like when you came home?
Well, you know, everybody was, you know, very receptive, and I have a very loving family, and of course my friends, that's sort of a little bit different. You know, the way I have to answer that is that I sort of left a lot of my friends behind, and in North Carolina, and I had, you know, at the end of my tour of duty, I had become involved and married to a Maryland girl. So a lot of my friends, you know, and I never really reunited the way, you know, to the point where we were friends before going in the Marine Corps, which in a sense is sort of sad when you look back, but I just felt like, you know, my life was in Maryland basically, and so I made new friends.
How did the community react, and how did that make you feel?
Well, I mean, in general, the whole outlook in America toward Vietnam veterans at that time, and I think it's always been in a sense this way, was sort of negative. You know, they called us baby killers and that kind of thing, and of course, you know, and most people I knew that I had been in the Marine Corps didn't know that I had not gone to Vietnam, so they just grouped everybody together. They just didn't, at that time, I think it's one of the lowest times in the history of America when it comes to the esteem, you know, that the military had. You know, I just think you just sort of had to be determined and look to the future, and no matter what people thought, and sort of prove them wrong in a sense. And after a while, it changed. You know, that's the good thing about the world. You know, I mean, I think during Reagan's time when he was president, we had a whole new perspective toward the military come in. But it was kind of crazy back in the '60s. I mean, then you had the entire hippie thing. They were protesting the war, and interestingly enough, I got involved in that a little bit.
Did you get involved after you served?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it was just, I think it was just a time when I wanted to try to find out who I was. You know, the Marine Corps had told me for 4 years who I was. You know, they tell you when to get up, when to eat, when to march, when to hike, or do 25-mile force marches, and when to go to war, and when to do this and when to do that. And it's a great thing. I love the military. I'm very proud of the military. But then there's another aspect there that it's almost like, you know, you don't have to have a lot of responsibility in the Marine Corps other than doing your jobs as a Marine. But it's not life. It's not, life. Life is far more complex. And so when I got out of the Marine Corps, life kind of was very intimidating to me in a lot of ways, and I was just sort of taking it one day at a time. But I kind of dropped out. You know, that was one of the phrases they used back in the day. Dropped out of society. You know, let my hair grow. Big beard, and bell bottoms, barefooted, you name it, man.
How did you feel about the government, like, after the war and everything?
I wasn't real happy with the United States government. I mean, I've never been hugely political. I love our system of government, and I think we have the greatest constitution. Our Constitution is the greatest thing that ever happened when it comes to governing parties and ruling and that kind of thing. But I mean, I think people, especially who had been in the military, were pretty disillusioned with the government at that point, because they just felt like the government really hadn't backed the troops, in Vietnam. There was all kinds of, it's gotten, I think it's gotten better, but there were all kinds of stories about the lack of proper care in the VA hospitals for the wounded vets and stuff. And it shouldn't be. A person fights for this country, they should really be getting the best medical care, and it hasn't always been that way. I don't know exactly. Hopefully they're doing better at it now,
How do you feel about the war today?
The Vietnam War today? Well, I look at the world, the world is shrinking, and there's an old saying, no man is an island, and now I realize that, there had to come a point in American geopolitics and stuff when they realized that, these two oceans, big oceans on each side of us and stuff, they couldn't really isolate us anymore. And so I think in a sense, the Vietnam War and even wars after that, like what's going on in the Middle East and stuff, is proof that we live in a shrinking world, and that everything we do affects everybody else. You know what I mean? And we can't escape things like that. So I look at the Vietnam War as just sort of a time of trial, almost an inevitable thing, clash between capitalism and communism in a world that's going through growing pains, you know.
Do you think that we should have joined the war, or do you think we should have stayed out of it?
Well, I guess, see, I'm one of those guys, I always see both sides. That's been a problem all my life, you know. If you guys came to me and you had an argument, a fight or something, I would see the validity of both of your arguments. It's hard for me to sort of say, bam, you know. So I understand your question, and I know there are several different sides there, but I guess I lean toward staying out of it. I question in my heart of hearts, I wonder, I mean, I don't want to see people suffer, and sometimes I think that if you see some people suffering, then maybe we should intervene. But if that's not the motive, that's the whole question. What's the motive for intervention, you know? So in Vietnam, I wonder why we got involved, you know, and how we could have even thought that we were going to be victorious, because you can't just change the culture, you know, you can't change thousands of years of history, you know, and so I guess I lean toward maybe, you know, I look at that wall in Washington, and all those young troopers, you know, soldiers and Marines and airmen and Navy that didn't come back, and I think, man, you know, I don't know if it's really worth it, you know.
How has the war changed your life?
Well, you know, back to that question, you know, when you asked before about, do I think I should have gone? I think it's given me a greater appreciation for how tentative, you know, life is. Life is very delicate. I mean, the reason I didn't go is simply because one day at Paris Island they picked me and another guy because we volunteered to go do something else, you know, for the government. And at one moment when I was 18 years old, I raised my hand. It literally changed my life. I mean, because had I not done that, I probably would have gone to Vietnam. And had I gone to Vietnam, I might not be sitting here being interviewed by you right now. So it's given me sort of a deeper, almost a mystical perspective when it comes to life and how strange life can be sometimes. You know what I mean? The decisions we make and how the ramifications and stuff are eternal sometimes. You know.
That's all my questions. So.
Okay.
I don't know how to stop recording.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What?
Oh, stop. Can you shut it off?
I don't know why he's whispering. I don't need to do this video or anything. I just need it so that I can. I'm happy. That way